And I can send everyone the link while you do
I'll
hello. Or I guess
yeah,
we should wait a minute so people can come over.
we can wait a minute. And if someone is watching this very beginning, we were scheduled to go live at another link that we had pre-created, and Zoom is not connecting to that. So we've had to create this new link, and now Kristen is going and telling the people in the waiting room
I
to
can
come
send everyone the
join us
link
here. So
while you. Wow.
I guess this is an okay thing about this is fine. It's okay.
Okay, we are live, and I just let everyone know that there is a new link, or to head over to our homepage. So
Oh,
we
that's
have
good.
some people joining us already, but maybe we'll give everyone a couple more minutes to catch up with our tech problems.
I think that would be good, since there were like 20 something people waiting to watch it.
Cool.
Thank you everyone for your patience. We haven't done much live streaming since the peak of quarantine in the US, like mid 2021. And so 2020, 2021. So I think we're a little technically rusty.
We are. It looks like everyone's coming over. Oliver, who was on the first chat, is now over in the new one. And
Hello, Oliver.
hi, Oliver. Hi, Arif. So it looks like we could probably get started.
Okay, well, take two. So hey everyone, Daniel from WikiTongues here with Kristen from WikiTongues, and those of you who follow us regularly know that we have some really exciting new programs this year that we're really excited to tell you about. WikiTongues began initially as a project to crowdsource language documentation, which we still do, and we post a lot of the videos that people send us on our YouTube channel, which is how most of you found us in the first place. But last year, we started doing something a little different, and that was directly supporting new language revitalization projects. So we assembled a cohort of 5 people who we had been working with in some kind of language documentation capacity, and got them a degree of support to get their language revitalization projects started in their communities. We did this because language revitalization, that is the process of keeping your language alive or breathing new life into your language if it is endangered or dormant, is a daunting task. It can take a generation to achieve and requires a lot of different skills that are not easy to access. And unfortunately, unless you're in a few parts of the world, there's really no support for getting a project like this off the ground. So we wanted to see if it was possible to make it easier for more people to start or accelerate mother tongue projects in their communities. Thanks to a really generous grant from the J.M. Kaplan Fund, we're going to be able to support 75 new language revitalization projects between now and 2025, starting with 15 projects this year. So last November, we opened it up to the public and asked people to submit short applications to explain the kinds of language revitalization projects that they wanted to start. And we got around 150 applicants from all over the world, all of them submitting really amazing applications. And it was a painstaking process, but we whittled it down to 15 projects that we're going to be able to support this year. And so we're going to tell you about some of these 15 people, their languages, and how they hope to save them.
Yeah. So for starters, some of them are in the chat, some of the activists, and watching this live stream, it's great to see Benson and Adrisa's name pop up, and you will be hearing about their projects in just a bit in this live stream. But to start off, let's start off in Australia with Sylvia. Sylvia is an Onondagatwa woman from Bickerton Island, and she currently lives in Darwin, Australia, where she is an interpreter with the Aboriginal Interpreter Services. And the Onondagatwa language is an Aboriginal language, which is a language isolate spoken by approximately 1,500 people. Historically, it's an oral language, and so Sylvia's goal for this year during the cohort is to increase literacy and opportunities for local Anandiliakwa children by creating books for them. During the year, she's working alongside her project partner, Bing, to translate and contextualize 12 children's stories from the public domain into Anandiliakwa stories like Rapunzel, The Three Musketeers, and others like that. And they're also doing some original content and original children's books during the year. And then moving over to Africa, we have Moshe, who is a San activist originally from Namibia, but currently living in South Africa. He is the founder of the, I hope I don't mess this up here, I worked on it earlier today, the Southern African San Development Organization, which is an organization that supports the development of the 2 indigenous San communities within his region. And so for his project within the cohort this year, he is publishing and creating Kwemden language learning materials, and then holding a 3-month-long Kwemden language teacher training workshop in order to teach the next generation of Kwemden language instructors. Kwemden is an indigenous Khoi language spoken by approximately 8,000 people across Southern Africa. It's not taught or used in the education system in South Africa, however, and so Moshe's project will be providing critical resources for the language. And then moving on up from South Africa up to Mali, we meet Idrissa, who I just said hi to a few minutes ago. And Idrissa is a Dogon language activist. He teaches national languages at the University of Bamako in Mali. And he's a Dogon speaker. The Dogon languages are a closely related language family spoken by approximately 600,000 people across its dozen languages. And some linguists classify these languages as separate, some classify them as a dialect continuum, but overall the Dogon primarily consider themselves as part of one united ethnic and linguistic group. Idrissa is specifically a Tenuso speaker, and this year he will be recording the memory of ethnic conflict and terrorism of community members within the Tenuso language.
So across the Atlantic, in the American continent, we have a project in the US state of Louisiana led by a man named Jonathan. Jonathan is a Kurivini speaker, also known as Louisiana Creole, a French Creole language that emerged from the confluence of 17th and 18th century French varieties with West African languages like Wolof, Mende, and Ewe, indigenous Muskogean languages like Choctaw, as well as a bit of Spanish. Now, Louisiana has a 4-century, nearly 5-century-old Francophone history. And in the past several decades, there have been efforts to revitalize Louisiana French. Unfortunately, Louisiana Creole, Kurivini, has not been extended this same lifeline. And so it is critically endangered with fewer than 10,000 speakers. So Jonathan and his team, which include his partners Christopher, Adrian, and Clifford, or Cliff, are working on resource development. They are in particular developing a website that can serve as a kind of hub for learning materials, grammar, lexicons, audiovisual documentation, and all that you need to learn Louisiana Creole and pass it on to the next generation. In Florida, a web developer named Julia, who's a member of the Muskoke Nation, is working to revitalize her language, Muskoke, also known as Creek. There are around 4,500 speakers of Muskoke in what is primarily now the US states of Florida and Louisiana. Unfortunately, like the majority of indigenous languages on this continent, Muskoke is now endangered, especially owed to the forced assimilation policies of the United States and Canada that endured well into the 1980s. So Julia is working on an extension of what has been an oral history project since 2015. People in the community documenting the speech of elders to preserve not just their memory, but also rigorous spoken examples of the language. And she wants to use those resources to standardize learning and teaching materials, which she's going to publish online. Finally, in Peru, a project led by Floro is working to sustain the Ayacucho Quechua language, known natively as Quechua Chanca. Now, broadly speaking, the Quechuan languages are among the most widely spoken indigenous languages across the American continent, but not all Quechuan languages are in an equally healthy state. There are fewer than 1 million Quechua Chanca speakers and an increasingly aging population. So Floro has assembled a team of young Andean people who are working to document the ecological knowledge of Andean people in the Quechua Chanca language. In particular, they're building a database of indigenous names for flora and fauna in what could be described as a project for environmental linguistics. And we'll be announcing the rest of his team members in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and just so you all know, we're running through these really quickly. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat box, because at the end, we'll go through and answer any questions that you have. And then moving back over to Africa, we go at Egypt with Momin's project. Momin is a Nubian speaker, a language which has been spoken along the banks of the Nile River for hundreds of thousands of years. And Momin is the founder and director of Nubi, which is the first organization centered around preserving Nubian heritage and creating resources for learning the two Nubian varieties, which are Kenzi and Nubi. They currently have a language learning app called Nubi, fittingly, which can be downloaded through the Google Play Store. And this app allows users to go through lessons in Nubian on the go, and it currently has over 10,000 downloads to date. And during this cohort year, they're working on creating an iOS version of this app, so it'll be available also at the end of the cohort cycle for iPhone users if you have an iPhone. Then after that, they hope to create a chatbot on Facebook Messenger, which will have translated Nubian words and phrases that users can use to learn and use in conversation. And so these steps will really help expand the reach of the Nubi language to the over 10 million ethnic Nubians living in northern Sudan and southern Egypt. Then over to South Asia, our one project within the cohort from India is supporting the Raji language. As of 2019, there were around 900 or a little less than 900 speakers of the Raji language, the majority over the age of 50. And so for her project, Tulsi, a Raji woman, is focused on the next generation of speakers. She is working with the linguist Kavita Rastogi from the University of Lucknow. And I believe I saw Kavita's name also in the chat, or at least in the first linked chat. I hope she made it over to this one. And her and Tulsi are working together to create a weekend play workshop for children where the kids will play games and learn introductory words and phrases in Raji through those games and playtime together. And then from there, they will work on learning the Raji orthography through an alphabet reader Kavita and Tulsi are creating. And Tulsi has 4 children herself, and she is really looking forward to being able to pass down her language to her children and the rest in their generation. And then up in London, we have Joanne, whose project is focused on changing people's attitude to her language, Scots, through art. Joanne is a Scots speaker, which is a West Germanic language primarily spoken in Scotland and Ireland. Census data is a bit iffy on how many speakers there are, but estimations are between 1 and 2 million speakers of the Scots language. And so alongside her project partner, Lewis, they're coordinating cultural nights in London through their organization Bothy, which is spelled B-O-T-H-Y. And it's an artist collective organization. So they will be hosting these cultural nights in London throughout the year that will not only promote the importance of Scots, but also highlight its status as a language within its own right in the UK.
In Oman, there's a project led by Saeed. Saeed is a speaker of 2 languages, Sheret and Hobyot. These are what linguists call modern South Arabian languages. If you're familiar with the languages of Arabia, Mesopotamia, the Levant, you'll be familiar with the Semitic language family, which includes more widely known languages like Hebrew, Arabic, and Amharic. The modern South Arabian languages are indigenous to Oman, Yemen, and parts of Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, these languages are not taught in schools. They're under-resourced and kind of chronically unsupported and all endangered. So Saeed is part of a cohort of young people who come from the different communities representing 4 modern South Arabian languages. He happens to speak 2 because his mother's from one community and his father's from the other community. So he and partners from his cohort are working on a series of books about the beautification of camels, which they're going to translate into the different modern South Arabian languages and disseminate on popular platforms like WhatsApp and other online channels. This is a really interesting project because it is as much a cultural preservation project, a cultural heritage project, as much as it is a linguistic project. And we're excited to be able to support these communities. In Alaska, or what is now Alaska, the Upper Tanana River language, or what is called in English the Upper Tanana River language, is spoken by 100 people, or just over 100 people. It's an indigenous Athabascan language, and Polly is working on developing a weekend workshop on ancestral Tanana territory, where the language can be passed down in a kind of traditional land setting, and indigenous cultural practices can be passed down at the same time. Polly's going to be rigorously documenting this workshop, which she hopes will be a pilot for long-term and recurring weekend workshops on her people's ancestral homeland. Finally, also in Alaska, the Tlingit language is spoken by around 100 people as well. And Heather is working on streamlining educational resources so that young adult education can scale beyond the classroom. There have been efforts to revitalize Tlingit over the past couple decades, and she believes that if it can be made more accessible to families to do at home, to teach their children at home, those revitalization efforts will be accelerated.
And for our final few projects over in Taiwan, we have Benson, who is working with his partner on creating the first dictionary for the reawakening Taiwan language. The Taiwan are a Taiwanese indigenous group, and their homelands are within the hills and basin area of Tainan County. The Taiwan ancestral language unfortunately fell out of use in the late 19th century, primarily due to political pressures, as in many languages around the world. But there has been a growing reawakening movement for the language. Back in 2019, during the International Year of Indigenous Languages, SIL International recognized it as an independent language, thanks to activists pushing for this, and assigned it its own ISO code. And so this dictionary will be reflective of all 4 subgroups of the language and cover the full spectrum of the language. And so Benson and his team hope that it opens the doors for more people to reclaim their heritage language. Over in Poland, we meet the language activist Tioma, who is the youngest native speaker of his language, Wimishorys. Tioma is currently a PhD student at the University of Slavic Studies in the Polish Academy of Sciences, I believe, where he was writing his dissertation on the accounts of Ilamovians from post-war persecution. Wimishorys was once the vernacular language of its town, but it was banned by the Polish government in public use, or banned in general, until 1956. So with only 20 native speakers left, Tioma's main priority really is creating documentation of the language. This year, he has a really lofty goal for the number of hours of oral histories for video recordings, which he will then transcribe and translate into Polish. And he hopes that through this, heritage speakers and language learning fans in general around the world will be able to take advantage of these resources. And then lastly, but of course, definitely not least, we have Hilario over in Mexico. Hilario is a Maya linguist and educator with his research primarily centered around Maya language documentation and revitalization. So focusing on Yucatec Mayan communities and working in collaboration with local universities and organizations, Hilario is aiming to bolster his language by designing a culturally relevant environmental STEM curriculum for local schools. This year, Hilario and his team will create the curriculum by incorporating local ecological wisdom, using Yucatec Mayan as the language of transmission for that curriculum. And then later in the year, his team will work closely with teachers, students, and parents in 5 different indigenous Quintana Roo primary schools in Mexico to collect data on the program's effectiveness, ensuring a linguistic future for the next generation of students. And that is all our 15 projects in a very fly-by-fly overview. And so as we mentioned at the beginning, we will be introducing the activists, their teams, and their projects more extensively and individually on our Instagram account over the next upcoming weeks, giving them the justice they really deserve so you can interact with them more in depth from there. So you can follow along our Instagram page for that. That's at WikiTongues, and we'll add this all to this new YouTube live stream description. So we'll add our Instagram page, and we will also add our email for any questions, and then our newsletter link.
Now, you'll notice that this cohort includes people from every peopled continent, every peopled continental region at least, and from language communities that have as few as 50 speakers and as many as 1 million. The reason for this is that language endangerment takes many forms, and so too does language revitalization. Our hope over the next 3 years is to standardize an approach for anyone to think about starting a language revitalization project so that the methods for doing so can be more easily understood, more easily picked up, and anyone who asks themselves the question, how can I save my language, will be able to answer it for themselves. One thing I'm really excited about is we've consistently made noise about doing original content. If you're a patron of WikiTongues, you'll know that we talk about original content all the time. And we're going to be using this cohort as an opportunity to start working on that. So there are some really, really remarkable stories here that we want to share with you. And we're going to be working with each of the members of this cohort to produce videos about their community, about their language. And so you'll get a really cool illustration of the kind of things that they're working on. So stay tuned for that. You can also subscribe to our newsletter if you head over to wikitongues.org. And if you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at WikiTongues, we're going to be posting about each of these wonderful cohort members over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we will add that newsletter link also in this description once we sign off. And that is a very good segue into one of the questions that we received in the chat, which is how to apply for the project. So because of the funding we received from the JMK Innovation Prize, we know for certain we will have this project for at least 2 more years. The goal is to have it an annual event going on into the future, but we know we have the funding for at least 2 more years. And so applications for next year's cohort will open up at the end of this year, around November, end of November. So you can sign up for the mailing list or follow us on social media or all of the above to be updated as to when that opens up. And you are eligible to apply from anywhere in the world. We try to keep the application short and sweet to make it easy for you to apply. And we hope to see your name listed there next year. Let's see.
And oh, sorry, Kristen.
I was just going to say, we'll give it a few more minutes for you all to send in any questions that you might have.
And anyone who, and those who are selected to join a cohort will receive $2,000 USD in unrestricted funding for the year, as well as a year of training, networking opportunities, and other kinds of logistical support to see your language revitalization project through, or at least the first year of it through, because language revitalization is a lifetime commitment.
Yeah. And if anyone is interested in volunteering for the cohort, we are working to support each of these cohort members to the best of our ability. So if you have skills that you'd like to contribute to the cohort, if you would like to help Saeed or Sylvia with designing their children's books, or their books. Sorry, Saeed's not working on a children's book, but designing their books, and you have design skills. Let us know if you think you could be a translator or interpreter for the year for our group calls and for communications. Let us know. We're looking to add a couple more people to our translation teams for Spanish, Hindi, and French. Or if you have press connections, anything like that, please let us know. Yes, Callum, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. This video will stay on our YouTube channel as a regular video, so you can go back and rewatch it, and feel free to send us an email. We set up an email specifically for this program. It's revitalization@wikitongues.org. So you can send us an email with any questions about the program or the activists, or trying to get in contact with them, and so on. And I think if no one has anything else, we will sign off. I will leave the links, or we will leave the links in the video description below, which will stay on our YouTube channel for you to watch back. And feel free to email us or connect with us on social media. And thank you all for joining. We are very excited for the year ahead, and we hope you all enjoy learning more about these languages and the activists behind their revitalization movements.
Yes. Since this is on YouTube, I feel it's important to add that if you follow us on YouTube, you'll probably notice that we haven't been as active lately as we normally are. And that is in large part owed to the fact that we have been getting ready for this program. This program also does not replace our other work. So if you want to keep sending us language videos from your community, please do. We would love to help you safeguard them. And now that this is finally underway, we'll be getting more active on YouTube again with the usual language videos that we post. So thank you all for your patience with our relative silence recently.
Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. And it was great to be live on YouTube for the first time in a couple of years. And we will see you back here